Thanks, Alan. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to follow that video up. It'll be nothing snazzy in my presentation, but I suppose just to give an overview in terms of what I'm going to talk about today, just give a bit of a background about myself and my research. As Alan said, I recently completed a PhD in this area. Go through a couple of definitions in terms of knowledge, why we need to manage it, I suppose, from a construction perspective, what knowledge management actually is, some of the activities or systems that contribute to it, important role of management and owners, potential benefits, and then some more specific examples of KM in construction and best practice. Just, I suppose, to give a context in terms of my own background, I'm currently a lecturer in WIT in construction and civil engineering, I suppose teaching a number of modules and supervising dissertations. My background is very much construction management from WIT initially. I also completed studies in information technology, so I have a keen interest in the exploitation of IT in construction, and in my PhD, which was completed last year in WIT. A 6-year trek, I suppose, and really focused on knowledge management within the leading Irish construction organisations, mainly the big contractors, but I also looked at other parts of the industry, other sectors, including organisations like ESB, Arup, Mouchel, Parkman, etc. So I've done a lot of kind of primary research, talking to the big companies, a lot of interviews and case studies to try and kind of identify best practices and the current kind of status of KM within the industry. So I suppose a good starting point, and I don't really want to get into a big philosophical debate at this hour of the morning, but understanding what knowledge is and how it maybe differs from information. I suppose a fairly simplistic definition is that it's expertise and skills acquired through experience or education. So that could be at an individual level or an organisational level. And really, knowledge kind of exists across a spectrum ranging from explicit knowledge, which can be codified as information and we can store in databases or in document format. But at the other end of that spectrum, then we have what's called tacit knowledge, which is I suppose of more value, is the hard-earned experience, problem-solving nature, very much individualised. I suppose the example I always picked up on building sites was talking to foremen who were 60, 65 years of age, nearing retirement, and they had a wealth of knowledge in their heads, and to tap into that and to be able to capture that for future use when they retire would be invaluable in an organisation. So it's the hard to define, hard to articulate type of knowledge and skills that is really, I suppose, the most valuable in an organisational setting. I suppose in terms of what knowledge management is, it's about, I would look at it from two perspectives. It's about enhancing both the performance of an individual, but also having a benefit for the wider organisation. And by getting individual staff members or professionals to buy into knowledge management and showing them that there's an opportunity for them to develop their own knowledge and skills is valuable. But it also encompasses the projects within the construction industry, the organisations itself, and then external sources of knowledge, such as organisations like CITA, academic organisations and other stakeholders on construction projects. I've found that, I suppose, that there's a number of processes associated with it that seem to reoccur, and we'll talk maybe about some examples, but creating knowledge, capturing it, storing it, if you can reduce it to information or to a storable format, finding and sharing the knowledge throughout the organisation, and that kind of restarts the cycle of creation again. The main reasons I found why organisations in construction, I suppose, need to manage knowledge is that it's the critical organisational resource. Okay, we're into delivering buildings and infrastructure, but really it's the people and the professionals and their knowledge and expertise is what really delivers projects. And the biggest challenge within the industry, I suppose, is the dispersion of that knowledge, either at national or international level, and trying to ensure that it's captured or shared across the organisation. Obviously, in the current climate, it's important with increasing competitions that we exploit the knowledge of the organisation as much as possible to maximise business opportunities for the organisation. At a project level, a project is completed, everyone disperses, and what tends to happen is the lessons that are learned on that project, the valuable knowledge is lost. And really that needs to be captured and retained within an organisation, so that if we ever do a similar project in future, we're not reinventing the wheel, we're not making the same mistakes. And that's something that happens quite a lot. And talking to people was one of the biggest challenges, was actually that they could see people making the same mistakes over a long period of time on similar type projects. So to try and retain and capture that knowledge gained in project is highly valuable. The third pillar, I suppose, is maintaining highly skilled staff. So developing the knowledge and expertise of your staff will ultimately, I suppose, lead to better project delivery and I suppose improved organisational performance. A fourth reason, I suppose, is the IEI have I'm not sure if some people might be familiar with a CPD accreditation scheme, where they actually accredit organisations in the broad engineering sector for their CPD practices. And one of the criteria is to actually have a knowledge management system or knowledge management practices in place. So a number of the organisations, leading organisations, would be engaged within that scheme, and IEI actually spend a lot of time helping organisations improve their practices and developing KM along with other CPD issues. I know that today's focus is really on information technology and IT, and that's the main remit of CITA. Initially, my own research was solely focused on IT as the de facto kind of system for KM, but really what I found was that it's people and HR issues are equally important as IT, and that you need the backup of softer side of things to improve KM. So from a HR perspective, really, there's a number of different activities that they can get involved in to help develop knowledge of staff across the organisation. Simple things like even organising up-to-date staff CVs that reflect the knowledge and expertise of your staff can be quite useful, particularly if you're bidding for work or whatever. But obviously using training and development activities, performance management, etc. to provide a platform for KM. So there's many different activities and systems that can be used, and I suppose it depends on getting a fit with your own organisation and existing practices that are already there. Some of the more, I suppose, immediate ones that could be looked at are things like doing site visits and getting people out of their day-to-day job and getting them out, looking at different projects and getting a different perspective, meeting people and discussing problems, issues, new technologies, whatever. Using in-house training, so getting your experienced staff members to deliver training activities to younger staff and pass on the knowledge that way. And lessons learned, we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, capturing the knowledge of gained on projects so that it can be harnessed for future use within the organisation. So I suppose IT is just as important, and the three kind of areas I've honed in on, and I'm sure Richard will probably touch upon some of these technologies in a bit more detail in terms of PM, but an intranet is I suppose a central repository that's quite useful for for harnessing information and knowledge within the organisation, having things like company news, communities of practice, bulletin boards, discussion forums, those kind of things. But also more specifically, maybe hosting a lessons learned database where project knowledge can be easily accessed, and a staff skills database where we can search for people with a particular expertise across the organisation. And that's quite useful where you have maybe dispersed offices or projects around Ireland or across the globe as it is at this stage. I suppose simple things with these systems, these are all basics of IT, that they're available and accessible to people, that they're user friendly, that the information and the knowledge up there is up to date. If it's out of date, people tend to get turned off quite quickly and don't really want to engage with it, and that it's secure. So if you're putting up information that's commercially sensitive or is your competitive advantage, you don't really want people to be tapping into that without your knowing. One of the biggest, I suppose, drivers or issues is that the owner or the senior management of a company really needs to get behind it, and as with any kind of business initiative, if they don't back it fully, it's not going to succeed. So they need to champion it. in many respects, the people that own or manage a company are effectively like knowledge hubs, and they would have a lot of contacts and networks throughout the industry, throughout the organisation, and would have their finger on the pulse. So really, they would be at the centre of knowledge management within an organisation. Obviously, on a more simple basis, they might undertake some research and development for particular projects, and maybe capturing that knowledge and sharing it about new technologies or new systems or whatever, and dispersing it to the wider organisation. I also found a lot of these people get involved in the kind of the CPD and HR side of things. They appraise the performance of staff, so they understand where people are in terms of their knowledge, what they know. As I said, delivering seminars to staff, making sure that lessons learned practices are undertaken and carried through properly, and also getting, I suppose, your managers together to talk about various aspects and share knowledge on a regular basis. I suppose sometimes with all the hustle and bustle, people get so bogged down in their own job that they don't really, take the time out to maybe talk to their counterparts on another project or in another part of the organisation and find out what's going on. And even simple things like just bringing your contracts managers or department heads together and discussing current issues, and looking at maybe recurrent problems or various issues across the organisation could be quite beneficial. So even just giving that time to people to actually to talk and to share experiences is invaluable, and that's really where people will share their high value, I suppose what I would call context specific knowledge, maybe a particular discipline, the healthcare sector or civils or whatever. You can, I suppose, shoot the breeze about various issues relating to that. As I said, if KM is really to work in the companies that it does succeed in, they really focus on not just the organisation, but on getting people to buy into it and ensuring that staff feel that they're going to get something out of participating in knowledge management. So there's sometimes a tendency to say, well, okay, we want to extract all your knowledge from you or whatever. And people can be quite reluctant because that's their selling point within an organisation or what makes them unique. And oftentimes they don't really want to do that. So you need to get people to buy in, and if you can do that and balance the kind of the organisation and the professionals, obviously there's benefits to be reaped there. Particularly for construction professionals, if you're a chartered engineer or surveyor or whatever, keeping up to date with the latest developments is an important part of your CPD. Professional learning is also quite important. Some of the organisations that done quite well also aligned the learning activities of the individuals with the company's business strategy. So if there was a change management or they were going into a new field, they would develop learning activities to focus on where the business strategy was moving to, and that worked quite well as well. I suppose I tried to kind of capture all this, and I think knowledge management is such a broad and complex thing, and it means different things to different people. And I suppose coming from the background I do, probably a bit more theoretical, but to try and kind of encapsulate the issues involved, that the organisation and its knowledge base is really a composition of the knowledge of the professionals that work in it, the knowledge that's gained on projects, and that all coalesces around to form this kind of critical resource that is the knowledge of the organisation. So trying to develop activities or systems that encourage the management of knowledge of professionals and projects, and supporting that with the intranet system, which would be suitable in a lot of situations, but also using the HR function or people management to ensure that your staff are engaging in knowledge management effectively. So there's a lot going on there on that, but we might kind of have a look at it later. I think there's a handout that people can have a look at it. Some examples of best practice. These are some of the organisations I dealt with over the 6 years. So it's first and foremost there, PJ Hegarty's, as part of fulfilling the Engineers Ireland CPD scheme, they developed a lessons learned database where they catalogued all lessons learned based on particular types of projects, whether it was relating to in situ concrete or precast or various things like that, and people could go in and search the database and find out what other people had learned on projects. what we found there was, while it was a good initiative and useful, people didn't tend to engage with it as much as they should have, because they didn't see it as part of their day-to-day work, and they were so busy with other things. So the company started developing lessons learned seminars where they get a staff member who had worked on a particular project to talk about their experience to other staff members and share it that way, and that generated a discussion, and people got talking about recurrent problems, etc. In CISCs, we looked at actually developing staff site visits. It was actually within the pharma division of CISC at the time. They'd, I think, 4 major pharmaceutical projects underway, and one problem or one issue I found was that the contracts managers rarely got a chance to meet each other off the different projects. So we actually got them together, they visited each other's sites, and we had a focus group session, and it was amazing the amount of knowledge and information that was shared between the guys, and to just take half a day out of their schedule and actually talk about clean room construction methods, particular subcontractors, how clients do things, protocols, procedures, etc. And they really got a lot out of that. Other high profile examples, Arup have a skills database called Arup People. It's an online searchable database, and basically I suppose Arup being a multinational organisation, multidiscipline, you can search for people with specific expertise and then get in touch with them through contact details. So it lists the projects they've worked on. Maybe they've a specialism in acoustic design in auditoriums or something, and you can look them up. They could be in Hong Kong or Australia, but you can get in touch with them then and maybe glean some of their knowledge from them. BAM contractors in Ireland have twice a year they have a knowledge sharing seminar where they basically bring all their project managers and contracts managers together in a hotel in Kilkenny from all their sites. They basically take a day off and they discuss particular themes, whether it's bridge construction or particular civil engineering technologies or aspects or whatever, and a bit of a social gathering, and even just through that process people start talking about problems they've had or issues or solutions they've come up with or whatever else, and that seems to work quite well for them. At the higher end of the scale, Lang O'Rourke, I suppose, are quite a large organisation across the globe. Again, they have a very well resourced intranet called iGate, and they have a big team backing that up with a lot of useful information, company news, discussion boards, etc. So it's at the kind of higher end of the spectrum. Another one then, ESB, had a management development program, and they actually got middle managers, project managers together to actually look at business problems and put them into groups, and got them to actually solve recurrent problems or issues that were relevant to the business, and getting the people from different parts of the country to come together and share their knowledge and experiences. So I suppose there's a balance there between technology but also the kind of softer getting people together. So IT alone I don't think will solve all the ills or is KM on its own, and really it needs to be supported by people actually getting together and discussing real issues. I suppose just to kind of finish on where to go with knowledge management and what are the kind of key ingredients. Obviously there's a need for a champion within the organisation at senior level. Depending on the size of the company, you may need a team, a multidiscipline team drawn from different parts of the business to work together. Again, getting your middle managers, maybe your contracts managers or your department heads or function heads together to work on it. Making sure that it's aligned with where the business is going at present, and it's helping the company achieve that goal. Recognising the barriers and enablers of knowledge management, and I suppose some of the biggest barriers I found are the actual nature of the industry itself, the kind of temporary nature of projects, the global dispersion or geographical dispersion, fragmentation within organisations, even within offices, people not communicating between functions or whatever. The Dublin-Cork divide in some companies or whatever was a big issue, but and even on a national level then or international level there can be problems. I suppose understanding what knowledge management is and what you want to get out of it, understanding the benefits and being able to demonstrate them, is anything that doesn't deliver benefits pretty quickly isn't going to last terribly long. And I suppose, as I said, a culture of sharing knowledge needs to be in place, and if people are reluctant to do that, or there's a reluctance to give away their secrets, that can be a challenge as well. Similarly, the senior managers need to be on board, as I said, a good supportive learning environment. I think building upon existing systems that you have already will help and will go a long way. Recognising the roles and experience of staff within knowledge management and tailoring solutions to suit them. So what maybe works well for a graduate engineer isn't necessarily going to work well for a guy who's been working for the company for 30 years or whatever. And the evidence from some organisations is non-financial incentives, maybe social activities, token prizes on a regular basis, or whatever, for contributions works well. So it's not becoming a financial issue. So recognising them, setting goals and allocating whatever resources you can to the initiative, and getting staff involved and getting feedback in the early stages to ensure that knowledge management is working for them and it's delivering on what the goals were, what you set out to achieve. That's basically it. Just thank you for your time. If there's any questions, I think we'll take them after.
Yeah, I think we're probably a little bit ahead. We might take one or two questions before